Okay, so good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all here bright and early. I hope everybody enjoyed their drinks at the reception last night and sort of shiny bright this morning. So my name's James Toon. I'm a product manager working for the Pure team, joined here by Owen Kilfeather from TU in Dublin. And this presentation came about following some conversations that Owen and I have been having over the last, well, I suppose, couple of years now, really, in a way, around digital transformation within organizations. And in particular, I think the interest in how the evolution of CRIS systems has developed, and we've hit a sort of, I guess, a next kind of sort of obvious point in the transition of how we work within these institutional kind of systems. So the plan for us for today was to just really run through a little bit about how some of the national, international kind of factors have developed over the past, well, almost 3 decades now, actually, before I hand over to Owen to do a little bit of a discussion around the own sort of institutional kind of journey that TU Dublin has had itself, and also some examples of what they're now working on too. So really, where did it all begin? So the sort of first concept of CRIS and RIM systems as we now know them sort of emerged in and around the early 1990s. And I think the first noted system that I'm aware of is the Metis system from the Netherlands, which I think was formed in 1993, with a view to start kind of consolidating information about research activity kind of more widely. That was a service obviously kind of grown locally within the Netherlands, and then started to sort of like branch out within there. And then eventually towards the end of the decade, around about the 2000 period, I think 2002, one of the main milestones in the kind of evolution of CRIS systems was the setup of the EuroCRIS movement, not-for-profit organization, which set about trying to kind of deal with issues around the interoperability and collaboration, if you like, between known kind of CRIS systems. And also at the same time, funnily enough, around 2002, a certain Danish company created its first system based out of the University of Aalborg, which obviously was called Pure. And that was a sort of fairly fundamental part of the Danish kind of research landscape as it was being developed out through. And then that sort of moved forward, of course, into the next decade. So through the 2000s, basically up to 2010 or thereabouts, the emergence of a very strong open access movement started to really push forward some of the more kind of scholarly communications-based demands and around these systems. And interestingly enough, it was around about sort of 2006 when my own first personal engagements came with open repositories and CRIS systems in general. Initially through the open sort of legal deposit library work at the National Library of Scotland when I was working there, and then on to the University of Edinburgh, where we started to work with the Scottish Research Pooling Initiatives, which was an interesting kind of example of an early community ecosystem based around Scotland, and in particular the drivers there to try and kind of bring together information about research more widely than just looking at research publication data, but also looking at the people and the other research products that were being produced. And that evolution then continued up until around about the start of 2010, where we started to see the need for consolidated systems to replace a very fragmented landscape, driven largely by the needs of the UK research assessment exercises. Now we've got a further 10 years on, 15 years on as it happens now than there, we're seeing kind of increasing kind of needs growing globally as research assessment systems have also kind of broadened more widely. There's been a greater increase in demand for information about research activity from funders, from governments, and pushing forward within there. And the overall kind of spread of what we call CRIS systems was pretty significant. Now, of course, during that period of time as well, the actual kind of the needs for them has also sort of changed quite significantly. And we've also seen a different move now happening away from the more kind of direct kind of cataloging of research information into more research management systems directly. So looking at use cases that support, for example, research funding and compliance, research strategy, reputational management, impact management. And a lot of these activities are not just focused on information themselves, but also on the workflow associated to that information. So how is information validated, confirmed, organized in more effective kind of ways? So that is an interesting kind of period of transition in its own way, and starts to bring in an entirely different kind of group of stakeholders across the organizations as a whole. So what are we now seeing as ways of sort of changing this next kind of period of evolution? So it seems to be that where we are now is really a kind of significant trigger point. We've got some new data infrastructure available and more widely we see an increase in standardization around data models. We see a huge increase in the demands around, for example, like PID systems internationally. Most universities will have their own PID strategies now. Most countries will have their own PID strategies now to support research information. We see a real kind of push on making sure that APIs are available more widely, more openly. And with that opportunity to be able to innovate what's possible within these information systems, how they connect to other systems, and how they can be used to kind of further this system up. And then in the last few years alone, obviously we've seen the AI revolution kind of really emerging. And with that, some extraordinary kind of advances in how we can manage data itself, how we can improve data quality, how we can improve data provision overall. And one other really interesting kind of facet of the AI revolution is that the fact we've started to really democratize the way that administrators of the CRIS RIM systems, who may or may not have been sufficiently technical, are able to now do more with the use of kind of tools, APIs, etc. as well within there. And where that's left us in terms of institutional benefits ultimately is in the delivery of a much kind of a wider kind of breadth, high quality information, so a deeper kind of levels of information in the systems that are within there. We've seen increased opportunities in harvesting from multiple external sources, lots of additional kind of choice and data transformations as we go there. And also within that, although a lot more data is obviously requiring a lot more work, we are also starting to see some reduction in administrative burden around some of the data quality management, as those tools are also then sort of fed out to third-party sources within it. But another interesting kind of issue that we've also started to now see, we've seen it for a while actually in our community kind of activities, but is this kind of concept of socio-technical engagement. So with the breadth of information and the engagement in research management kind of categories within institutions, the increased needs of data governance, the increased needs of research service, the research information as a service category within institutions has really started to push the need for those stakeholders to be able to kind of talk together and to be able to manage data governance in more effective ways. If you have built an entity model of research activity across your institution and you want to change some part of, for example, a syntax that might relate to a finance system, you can't just simply go and knock on a door and say, hey guys, can you change this process for me? You have to go through formal kind of processes and organizations within that. How we do that, the sort of social component of that is really starting to become kind of interesting kind of part of what we're trying to do. So that was just me kind of running through just a kind of really very brief of how we got to where we got to. And now I'd like to hand over to Owen just to talk through the journey for Dublin itself.
It's on screen here as well. So thank you, James. And yeah, I guess James and I have known each other for getting on maybe 3 years now. When I joined TU Dublin, he was part of the implementation team, helped us through the process of kind of onboarding the Pure system. So just a little bit about TU Dublin. So we're a relatively new institution. As you can see, we formed as a merger of 3 institutes of technology. That process started in 2019, but I could genuinely say that it is still an ongoing process. It's a messy enough job to take 3 geographically distinct, socially, culturally distinct institutions and bring them together. And that's actually a journey that's quite common across Ireland because of the move towards the technology universities is a government-led initiative, and so we have a number of technological universities who are all doing this thing. Coincidentally, or maybe not coincidentally, we're all adopters of Pure at different levels of our adaptation process. And so also that provides a very good peer support group, which so we're actually quite a close-knit peer community in Ireland, pure community in Ireland. So anyway, what was the point? Well, really was to reduce these information silos that we have across our institutions. You know, HR systems, finance systems, research information systems. Again, standardization. So we have kind of common data model. We have to agree on terminology, on controlled vocabularies. So that was another goal. Improve transparency of the data. So a common complaint which researchers, school managers, faculty, heads of research, and so on, they can't. You know, we're giving you this data, but we're not getting it back. You know, so we can't get kind of actionable data out of the system. So again, like this move is about transparency of that data. And then, of course, adopt the right once, use multiple times. So, you know, nothing annoys a researcher more than having to fill in the same information twice. So, going back to like how we got to this process, it really quite echoes what James was talking about, the evolution of the RIS system. So the Dublin Institute of Technology, which was one of the founder institutions of the university, had literally a paper-based research information management system. There were forms, RF, whatever, and you had to fill this in if you wanted to carry out funded research. And early in the digitization process of this, it was literally transposing those paper-based processes into a computer system. So there were just there was a bespoke system called the Research Information System, which was developed by the university. I later took on a hand in maintaining that code. And you know, that evolved quite nicely. And one of the things about developing your own system is that you can develop the kind of processes that will manage that system in exactly the way that your institution is used to. That's great because you get what you want. It's also very poor because it kind of locks you into those processes because you've now got this technical debt, if you like, that requires you to kind of stay on that path. So I guess around about, you know, the same time as the university was being formed, realization that this is an unsustainable technical approach. We needed to look at what was out in the marketplace. There was quite a long procurement process, a lot of due diligence, and Pure emerged as the preferred system for that. At that time, I had left the university, but I still had a consultation role, helping them with their CRIS requirements, and so I took on some work for the university to look at how we could go through this migration process from our old RIS system into Pure. And so very early on, I became more familiar with the API than I did with the front end of Pure. It's like, so that's where I was living for you know, a good 12 months, looking at how we were going to get the migration scripts to get data out of our silos and into Pure. So that was it's very good. Gave me a good kind of understanding about the capabilities and the limitations of the system. So that process, though, did make me realize that there were like gaps in the capabilities of, well, certainly of the old RIS system, but also in Pure. And this is why, to give these like 3 practical examples of how we have seen like that these modern CRIS systems that have this capability for extensibility and interrogation and write capabilities to the data are essential to the kind of actual good governance, good management of that data. So first example, we have a institutional repository. It happens to be built on Digital Commons. Digital Commons has an integration with Pure, so great. That should have been quite straightforward. Problem was that our implementation of Arrow, as it was called, the name, the branding of the institutional repository. We were a very early adopter of that, so the schema was developed in like in the noughties, A lot of the data, unfortunately, was encoded in custom fields. So generally speaking, you'd have a title, you'd have the authors, and then all the rest of the information would be encoded in a single text field called custom citation. So we didn't have the host publication of where this came from. The data was extremely messy. There was no like standardizations. It had essentially evolved as kind of staff had rotated in and out of the role of data entry for that. So when myself and Francis Madden, who is a colleague in the library, looked at this, this looked like a really horrendous manual task for doing this. We kind of estimated like a 6-9 month period, but around about that time, the GPT 3.5 model had come out, and we said, okay, but this is definitely worth a punt to see if we can do something with this. So we developed some scripts, we did some test data, and we ran a few experiments to see if we could just get the large language model to look at these custom citation fields and essentially split out the data into a number of pure compliant fields. And fair to say, it did a pretty good job of it, and certainly justified its use in there. So that kind of took us over that first initial hump, and it also validated this idea that, at least for kind of public data, stuff where there was no kind of ethical or data security issues, this was something that we were going to embrace. So that was our kind of first use of AIs with the API to kind of build out this to solve this particular use case. Then, okay, so now we're kind of getting into kind of that was a must-have, and then the nice-have was, well, okay, in the pure award management module, we have awards. So people give a description, PIs give a description of the work. They're going to give some data about what they're going to do in the thing, who their collaborators are, et cetera, et cetera. That's written for like a funder. That it has that language. It's got that future-looking tense. So we're going to do this, that, and the other. Then, well, we want to kind of go from the award to a project so we can put it on the portal. But the language really isn't suitable. It's kind of, the tense is wrong. They've already started the work by the time the project happens. So again, we looked at large language models, and we said, okay, well, let's just try prompting with the description of the award and see what the language model will do to change the tense, remove any personal information, any like financial information that might be in the description, any kind of poor formatting. And again, that was something we did with our kind of ongoing projects that produced a set of data. We kept those new project records confidential. We gave them to the PIs and said, can you please validate this? And we'll make it public in a month's time. So that proved very successful. Again, PIs were delighted, first of all, that this work had been done for them. They were happy that we had given them a chance to review that data, and thirdly, the data is capable of being extended as well. So we have scripts now that will examine research outputs from those researchers associated with the project, and we'll use the LLM to make suggestions to them as to whether they would like those research outputs linked with the project. Well, and the third example of how a simple thing that we just wouldn't have been able to do with the old system is that we have obviously personnel records in our HR system. It's called Core HR. Quickly, we realized there was an API for this. It had never been used across the university. Nobody had done it. There were kind of links in that would pull data directly, like SQL queries from the database. But there was a REST API, and we said, okay, this is exactly the kind of use case we need to look at as a pilot for the university about how we break out of these silos and integrate our systems. And so that integration with Pure and the HR system, using APIs in both cases, became the pilot which is being used by our digital and data transformation board as a kind of a best case for how we, as a university, share data securely and using these kind of good governance measures. So those are the three examples that kind of mirror, I think, what James is talking about, going from this kind of early, we have to kind of manage this data, to now we're moving beyond that to a point where we get to that reuse, that discovery, that serendipity of correspondence in our data that will bring us further along our research journey.